I want to thank you all for coming in, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. First up, our monthly special event. It's Wednesday's Pet, and we will turn the floor over to former Selectman Sherry Stenick and former First Selectman, former RTM member, former.
This is Bobble, and if you watch his head long enough, you'll understand why he got that name. We don't know if it's really a he or a she, but he's obviously very young, and he's looking for a good home. He's currently at 211 One Road Highway. So if anybody here knows of someone looking for a really cute cat who will bobble his head, there you just saw it. There's this one, there's one other one back in town. Female, this is a female, so I am told, I cannot tell. So, I love him. Anyway, if anyone would like to see him, and the telephone number at
254-4857.
203-254-4857. Thank you. Take him home.
Sherry, are you still batting 1,000? Have all these pets?
Still batting 1,000. Everybody's been adopted.
Fantastic. Fantastic. All right, next up, we have a special item on our agenda and some special recognition here. I'd like to take a quick moment to recognize a host of special guests. I think we have Dr. Title, joined by Tom Comm, Karen Parks, Doreen Munsell, and Gary Rosado, as well as, that's from our Board of Ed Central Office, as well as from Fairfield Ward High School, Housemasters Dave Ibling, Steve Feckety, and Deirdre Pressis. From the Board of Ed, is Pam here?
Yep.
Pam, yes, right in front. I'm looking behind. Where is she in the last row? Sorry, Pam. Pam Iacona, Chair of our Board of Ed. Fairfield Ward High School PTA, Catherine Giff, Elizabeth Finn, and Michelle Madungo, and others, Greg Hatzis. Mr. Coyne's mentee of the... I know you've had a number of titles recently. I didn't realize that was one of them. But this is all about special recognition for Mr. James Coyne. And Jim, I'm going to ask you to come up and please stand next to the podium so you can be properly recognized and or embarrassed by the recognition here. But for those of you that don't know, Mr. Coyne has made Fairfield proud and made our school system proud, and I have a special proclamation to read in honor of that. Whereas on Friday, April 27, 2012, Mr. James Coyne, headmaster of Fairfield Ward High School, was the recipient of the Connecticut Parent-Teacher-Student Association 2012 Outstanding Principal Parent Family Involvement Award at the Connecticut PTSA's annual statewide award ceremony, which was held in North Haven. And whereas each year, the Connecticut Parent-Teacher-Student Association selects one superintendent along with one principal or headmaster at the elementary, middle, and high school levels, respectively, who demonstrate the importance of the parent involvement in their schools. That means Mr. Coyne was the one principal recognized at his level in the entire state. And whereas the Fairfield Ward PTA Executive Board enthusiastically nominated Mr. Coyne for this honor, and because Mr. Coyne exemplifies the Ward acronym, welcoming, academic, respectful, dynamic, and ethical. And whereas Headmaster Coyne has earned the reputation of being accessible and welcoming to all, he has distinguished himself by going above and beyond the normal expectations for student support and faculty success, to share power, to communicate effectively, and to welcome all families into the school. And whereas Mr. Coyne is exemplary as a headmaster who has made a difference in the lives of those around him, he is a source of pride to Fairfield Ward High School, the Fairfield Public School System, and the entire Fairfield community. Now therefore, I, Michael C. Tetreau, First Selectman of Fairfield, do hereby proclaim Wednesday, May 2nd, 2012, as James Coyne Day in the realm. Congratulations.
I was hoping it would be tomorrow so I could take the day off. If I could just express my appreciation for this honor that our parents bestowed on me, really. It was very, very gratifying, although somewhat embarrassing, all the fuss, but the gratification I felt was that our families felt that their kids went to a school where they were cared about and where they did experience the welcoming, academic, respectful, dynamic, and ethical atmosphere that we try every day to achieve. And I think it really is a tremendous tribute to our teachers and staff who work with the kids every day, that their kids feel that way about the school and their parents feel that way about the school. And I just get the credit. So I really appreciate it, and I'm very proud of our teachers and kids and families, and thank you very much for this recognition. Thank you.
And I should ask, since this recognition came forward, any follow-on comments?
I just would like to echo the words of the proclamation, and am very grateful to Mr. Coyne on both a community-wide level and then also personally, as I have a daughter headed there next year. So very, very grateful that it's clear we will be welcomed and actively involved as you welcome parents to do so. So thank you so much for all that you've done.
I'd just like to echo Mr. Tetreau and Ms. McCarthy-Vahey's sentiments. The town could not be prouder of you, could not be prouder of the school system, and all that you do for it. And I think you're very gracious in thanking the parents and the families, because it's really kind of a big family over there. And I think you do a great job, and congratulations. It's well deserved.
All right. And just in final comment, it means a great deal to me because my father was part of the original team that opened up Warde High School. So thank you for carrying on in that fine tradition and keeping the Crimson Eagles / Mustangs alive and well. All right. Any other public comment at this point? All right, then thank you very much, Mr. Coyne. Congratulations again. Yes. Oh, and it's not himself now. I'll make a comment in a minute. The other camera that ran is Soundview from Soundview TV that is now going to televise some of our board meetings.
Oh.
They have the AT&T franchise.
Okay.
So that there's about 2,500 people.
Okay.
I do want to recognize, for those who are wondering what all the camera equipment's doing in the room, in addition to Fair TV, who has been televising our board and commission meetings for a while, we are joined now by Soundview TV that will be also televising our events and broadcasting them to the AT&T clients or their cable service. So we want to welcome the AT&T audience to our meetings, and thank you for joining us. Next up, we have to consider and act upon minutes of A, the combined Board of Selectmen meeting, Board of Finance public hearing, February 16th, 2012. Do I have a move to accept?
So moved.
A second.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yes.
Kristen?
As usual, I have discussion on the minutes, which are our official record, so we just want to note that I'm hoping in the future we won't delay action on minutes as long as we have for the first one. I'm sure they're was a good reason for that. I know that we had postponed item number 2. I think Mr. Walsh had a question on that, and I'll defer that to him, but I do have an amendment.
Okay, we just have the first minutes before us, February 16th.
Okay. My only comment about that was just the delay, otherwise I'm prepared to support them.
Okay. Mr. Walsh?
No comment.
Are we ready to vote?
Yes.
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next up, to consider and act upon the combined Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance public budget hearing from March 20th. So I have a motion to accept.
So moved.
A second?
For discussion purposes.
Okay. Any comments?
I made a request that I told this board that I was going to go back over Fair TV because there's a section there. I thought that section was going to be quite simple. When I started taking notes from it, it was quite extensive, and I did not really realize it was going to take that long. But it wasn't as simple as I thought. I would prefer to come back to next meeting if possible, because I'd like it to be as accurate as possible, without also editing those comments down so it doesn't take a page to put the section I thought was important in there. So I'm going to make a motion to postpone this to the next scheduled Board of Selectmen meeting.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Next up, to consider and act upon the regular meeting minutes of April 4th, 2012. Can I have a move to accept?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion?
No.
No.
Okay.
Yes.
Prepared to vote?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Done. All right, next up, to consider and act upon the minutes of special meeting from April 24th, 2012. May I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
A second.
Second.
All right, any comments? Kristen?
I move to amend the minutes, page 3, the first large paragraph. The fourth or fifth line, beginning, Selectman McCarthy Vahey said she supports this project, which needs adequate funding. She wants the Board of Selectmen to be more involved in the building committee process, and I would strike that to amend with Selectman McCarthy Vahey said she supports the adequate funding for this phase of the project. She wants the building committee to keep the Board of Selectmen updated and informed.
Okay, that's your motion.
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any more comments on the motion itself to amend? Ready to vote?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. So the minutes as amended, are there any other discussion point on the minutes?
No.
No.
All right, the minutes as amended are before us. Are we ready to vote?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Jen, did you get that change? Okay. All right, next up, resignations for information only. Marco Valera has resigned from the Town Planning and Zoning Commission as an alternate. Mr. Walsh, I think I sent you an email on that earlier.
Yes, you did.
And just for the record, we are looking for someone to fill that vacancy, so if there's anyone out there that would like to, please let us know. You can contact any one of us. This position was a Republican. Jim, did I say it had to be a Republican in email, or it could be anybody?
I think it has to be a Republican,
All right,
because it was an elected position this past term.
that's right.
By the
Sorry,
voters,
sorry,
yeah.
sorry, it's not an appointed position. Thank you for the correction. It does need to be a Republican. All right, next up, appointments. We have Ethics Commission. Martha Brooks, this requires unanimous Board of Selectmen approval. Martha is here. You have in your packet a breakout of the Ethics Commission, and we are looking to fill a few vacancies there. You have background on Martha. Do we have, can I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion?
Well, I would just, I think this is a great appointment. I've had the pleasure of serving with Martha on the Board of Selectmen for, I guess, more terms than I can remember, but...
RTM?
I mean, the RTM. And we've always worked great together, and she's always worked in a bipartisan manner. She's an attorney. I think her ethics are beyond reproach, and I think she's a strong candidate for this position, and I couldn't recommend her more highly.
Well, can I just say here, I have incredible respect for Martha Brooks and seek her input and wisdom often and guidance. And she was the chair of LNA when I was serving first and taught me much. So I'm thrilled that she's willing to step up to this role, which hopefully won't be too busy for her.
Heading on, I also had the chance to serve with Martha on the RTM. In fact, Mr. Walsh and I served with Martha and had the benefit of her wisdom on a special project where we're reviewing school reimbursements for the town. And I think the three of us not only worked together, but I think that there was a very lively discussion on a host of fronts, and Martha made a very significant impact on that. Let's see, any public comment? All right, back to the board. Are we ready to vote?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, it's unanimous. Martha, congratulations.
Congratulations.
And thank you for your service to the town. All right, next one.
Just
Next-
in regards to
go
that
ahead.
board, I didn't realize we were down so many people, I guess. I guess we should, and we have 2 vacancies that are coming up in July, and I don't know whether they can be, I didn't look at whether they can be replaced or not, or,
Go ahead, Krista.
I have been working with Kathleen Griffin in the First Selectman office, and have one of those, Mr. Lacavera, I believe, is not eligible for reappointment, and Ms. Seif is eligible. And have also, I have tried to work with her to contact some folks, including a Fairfield University professor who teaches business ethics.
great.
So definitely trying to make progress, because yes, this is.
I'll try to
needs be
find on
addressed.
our side of the aisle, a couple of people recommend, they know that they existed, so I'll try to assist in that as well.
That would be super.
Great.
And again, for anybody in the audience, the Ethics Commission is a very important board in our town, and certainly would welcome any interested parties to contact the First Selectman's office and let us know of your interest. Next up, an appointment to the Police and Fire Retirement Board. Mr. James Takami of 64 Edge Hill Place. May I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All right, any discussion from the board?
Yes. Once again, I think this is an excellent appointment. I've had to work, the ability to work with Mr. Takami on the board of, the RTM once again, and I think his resume is a perfect resume to be for the financial well-being of the town and the pension board. So I think he'd be an excellent replacement. I'm glad he's getting back involved, because he chose not to run for the RTM again, so I'm glad he's stepping up again, and I think he'd be an excellent appointment.
Kristen, any comments?
Yes, I am thrilled that Mr. Takami is willing to serve. As I've discussed with him, I want to thank him for leaving work early to get here. Also, I should have said that also to Mrs. Brooks. I am impressed not only with Mr. Takami's resume, but with the care and consideration which he gives items, which I also experienced in working with him on the RTM. And even in how you answered the questions on the questionnaire, very clear and concise summary of information, and I think that that's helpful, particularly in dealing with the issues around pensions, which are complicated issues, and it often requires translation. So I'm grateful that you're willing to step up to this role.
And just to add on to that, while I haven't had a chance to serve with Mr. Takami until now, I did have a chance as a member of the Board of Finance to watch him in action on the RTM. I am thrilled that someone with his background and skill set, specifically in the financial arena, would volunteer their time to help out on Fairfield pension boards. And I think that's another great statement to our community. And again, I thank you for making the contribution. Your skill and experience is something we couldn't buy, so thank you for giving it to us for free. And with that, any further comment from the public? All right, seeing none, back to the board. Are we ready to vote?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Congratulations and thank you.
Thank you.
Just, I think on Mr. Takami's That's just a function of this board. That doesn't go any further.
Correct.
All right, Mr. Takami? James, if you would get to the town clerk to get sworn in, that's the next step, and then, Paul, you will update him on the schedule for the pension boards, please. Great, great, because your approval process is done, you're in. Thank you. Ms. Brooks, you get to go to the RTM meeting.
She knows the drill.
All right, this is aside. Next up, to hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution. Resolved that Michael C. Tetreau, First Selectman, be and hereby is authorized to sign the agreement entitled An Agreement Between the State of Connecticut and the Town of Fairfield for the development of contract plans, specifications, and estimates in conjunction with the rehabilitation of the Valley Road Bridge, bridge number 04956, over Horse Brook Tavern, utilizing federal funds from the Highway Bridge. Am I missing something there? From the Highway Bridge.
Utilizing federal funds from the Highway Bridge.
Bridge program, from the Highway Bridge program. May I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Okay. Mr. White, do you have a presentation that goes along with this?
Yes, a brief presentation.
Rich, we may need you to, I guess, if you stand close enough to that mic, if not actually behind the podium, we should be okay.
This is a bridge that's been in the pipeline for, repair, rehabilitation. We're at the first initial stage of design. This is Valley Road, this way, Brookline Parkway, coming down this way. The bridge is right here. The stream goes underneath the road and over here. It's first phase is preliminary design. We've appropriated the money for the preliminary design, $185,000 several years ago. That we were waiting for it to move through the pipeline as far as the state DOT goes in terms of getting it ready for a funding agreement. So that's where it's at now. So just simply requesting authorizing First Selectman to enter into that funding agreement. In your package, I included the first page from that agreement. On the second page, you can see the breakdown of the numbers. It's $185,000 total project cost. There's an 80% federal share, which is $148,000, and that will leave eventually our local share just being $37,000.
Mr. White, just to confirm, that 37 has been approved already at some point?
The full 185,000 has been approved. I believe on the third page of what I provided is the account showing that 185,000 in place. It was approved several years ago.
Okay. All right, Kristen?
Do you remember when, several years ago, do you have a...
Approximately 4.
So it's been a little while.
Mr. Walsh?
Rich, that, the estimated municipal share of the 37,000,
Yes.
that's the part that used to have a program with the state, right?
Correct.
That went away.
Correct.
Okay. Another question.
Any further questions from the board at this time?
No.
Any questions from the public? Or comment from the public, I guess I should say. Seeing none, back to the board.
Okay. My apologies, because my printed sheets were different than the backup that we had online. But just to clarify that right now, we're talking simply about, in terms of the 185,000 estimated municipal cost is clearly just for the preliminary engineering.
Correct.
In other words, the Merritt Street Bridge, which is right around the corner, I think it was...
Right, downstream from this down here, yes.
Right, and we were looking at over 960,000 or so, I think it was, for that. So, at that point, can you just help me in terms of comparing process for those two bridges and...
Merritt Street's starting construction this spring. It's already out to bid and will be finished within 9 months. This one probably will take a year and a half to design, so they won't be interfering with each other in terms of causing traffic in the neighborhood, et cetera.
Okay, that's helpful. That's one of my... I also would just request, and maybe channeling Tom Conley, the RTM member, just that sidewalks, as this bridge reconstruction design is looked at, that sidewalks be considered and included
Yes.
in the design, since that's that area, even more so than the Merritt Street Bridge, is a very well-trafficked
No, I
pedestrian
understand.
area.
What will happen is, again, this is preliminary engineering. They'll develop at least 3 to 4 schematics of the bridge, first structurally and then how it lays out. And then we have a public hearing where we meet with the neighborhood to see what their concerns are and make sure we address those. And then zero in on a design, which would include consideration of sidewalk, et cetera. Then it moves forward to actual design. And I'd be coming back to you again for that money.
Great, thank you, that's helpful.
Okay.
Any further questions from the board?
No.
Ready to vote?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Rich, thank you. I think next up is also you, Mr. White.
Yep.
Item 9, consideration of a request from the Director of Public Works for an appropriation of $210,000 from the Water Pollution Control Authority, WPCA Reserve Fund, to provide the town's local share for an energy reduction project at the treatment plant. Furthermore, the First Selectman is authorized to execute any necessary agreements with the United Illuminating Company to obtain grants and interest-free loans related to this project. May I have a move to accept?
So moved.
A second.
Second.
All right. Mr. White, can you fill us in on that,
Sure
please?
thing. Again, this is a project that Ed Bone, my assistant, deserves credit for. One of many energy reduction programs that he's been working on for the last several years. The total, I'll just explain what it involves. This is an aerial photograph of the treatment plant. And all these tanks here, these all have air blowing into those tanks in a bubble form. Simplistically, like what you see in an aquarium, bubbles come up. And that air is critical to be controlled in a certain way to get a certain dissolved oxygen in these tanks to do different functions. And basically they're supplying the air to the microbes that really do the work in these different tanks. So anyway, there's several large blowers that blow this air into the tank. And this project involves, the treatment plant was rebuilt in 2003, and since then there's been a lot of improvements in the efficiency of some of this equipment. And this is a picture of the one previous to this we put in, very successful, very similar project. And that one there was put in 2 years ago, is saving approximately 750,000 kWh per year, which equates to $115,000 per year in savings. So based on that successful experience, Ed was successful in getting another grant loan from UI to purchase another unit. So essentially we'll be putting in a 150 horsepower unit that will replace a less efficient 200 horsepower unit. The numbers are, the total project cost is $481,000. United Illuminating Company provides a loan which is interest-free over a 3-year period. They also supply a grant for $171,000. So our local share is the $210,000 being requested. The simple payback on the project is 3 years, based on the savings of $103,000 a year in paying back both the loan and our $210,000 initial investment, local share. So the numbers work really well. The request is to take the money from the WPCA reserve fund, which they've already approved. That reserve fund stands at $2,100,000, so there's plenty of funds available. It's a good project. We've done it 2 years ago successfully. UI is actually coming down and going to install a meter at their cost to document those savings, because they think they're pretty significant.
Mr. White, just to clarify your presentation, this is coming from the WPCA funds.
Correct.
So the impact on the Fairfield taxpayer is zero,
Correct.
because this is all coming from other money. It's not money raised by tax revenue.
Correct.
All right. Second, again, I want to compliment Mr. Bowman on your team and yourself. Have we ever added up all the kilowatt hours that Mr. Bowman's project has saved us over time? I mean, that's just a huge... For those that aren't aware, this is another in a series of projects. One of those, again, it being new to the Board of Selectmen, one of the things that surprised me in the last 9 months is how many energy-saving projects Mr. Bowman has been involved in, what he's done for the town, what he's done for our environment, what he's done for clean energy in that time period. So, Mr. White, I want to thank you for your work, your efforts, and also Mr. Bowman for what he's done on that. With that, I'll open it up to any questions from the board.
Just to follow up on that, just at the treatment plant alone, he was successful in getting a grant previously for a fuel cell, 660 kW microturbines that run off of natural gas where we generate our own electricity, 34 kWh worth of photovoltaic cells, which encompass the whole roof for the compost building. And it's also currently working on a project where we'll produce 100 to 150 kW of electricity from the methane gas, which is produced as a byproduct of this plant. So it'll be a free source of fuel for that. So this, again, just with that facility, that's the things that he deserves credit for.
Tremendous. To the board, Kristen?
Question. Thank you, Mr. White and Mr. Bowman. It is impressive. And just to go back for a second, if you don't mind, to the photo of the plant. There are multiple tanks you referred to, and you said that a couple years ago we replaced some blowers, and I recall. How many more might you anticipate doing in the future? Is this...
You reach a point of diminishing returns, and this might be it, with respect to, there is still 3 existing blowers that serve their purpose. The reason why this one and the one previously is much more efficient is its variable speed. So if you think of it like a simple fan at home, if you had a fan and you turned it on or off, those are your only 2 choices. And those large blowers, some of the 200-300 horsepower blowers, that's how they work. They go on or off. And they can provide the base load, or they can provide a piece of that energy, air, that you need at a certain high demand time of the day. What you really want to do is tweak around the edges when the flow is low, or there's changes in temperature, so that you're throttling down the oxygen demand for these tanks. So that, getting back to that simple analogy with a fan at home, a more efficient way would be to have a 3-speed fan, low, medium, high. These are like infinite controls, so you have like a rheostat, you can go from 0 to 100. So instead of using one of those old 300 horsepower blowers in the old day, when you only maybe need 178 horsepower, you dial in what's equivalent to 178 horsepower. So that's why they're very efficient. They're also efficient in the way they throttle up and down electronically through the motor. The other ones can be throttled to a certain extent, but it's a very inefficient way. It's almost like, again, getting back to a fan. If the fan was on all the way and you stuck your hand behind it, or a piece of paper, you would throttle it down that way. The fan's still working 100%. So it's just those two things in combined that save an awful lot of energy in combination with being able to match the supply of air to the demand of air very precisely through the day.
Another question, if I may, through the chair. I am wondering, this is a grant from,
Yes.
so are there other projects that would be eligible? And if not, if so, why did you not choose them, and what made you choose this one over any other eligible
Well, this-
projects?
Well, we do about $1 million a year.
Mr. Bowman, if you could come up to the mic, please.
Depending on the guidelines that are approved by the state, we do anywhere from $600,000 to $1 million a year worth of these projects with UI every year. This is just the first of this year's project. This one was, we did this one first, it has the biggest payback. When we look at the projects for this building, for the Public Works Garage and the firehouse, in the next 2 or 3 months, you'll be hearing other proposals for the same thing. The other proposals are such that we won't know, and we do not need a local share. The UI money will pay for the whole thing. There's only 2 projects we've ever done, we needed a local share. They're both at the treatment plant, because these are very expensive pieces of equipment. We try and stage it, so we may do half this year and half next year, and that way you don't need a local share. So you'll be 3 more projects coming in the next couple of months.
Mr. Walsh, any questions?
What's the lifetime usage of one of these fans? Like, what's the expected life?
10 to 15 years.
10 to 15 years? The blower that we're taking out, is that something you guys are planning to just keep as an extra one, or are you going to sell
Yeah,
that?
it'll just be pushed to the side and mothballed. Yeah.
Mothball?
Yeah.
Okay, great, thanks.
Well, it won't be completely mothballed. Like I said, they will use it once in a while as an electric motor just to keep
Yeah.
it running, yeah.
So you'll have that on the side in case something broke
Yeah.
down and you needed a new blower?
And, yeah, keep it running, so in
Keep
case
it
you
running.
needed it
Yeah.
to run.
Yeah, okay, great. That's it. I just wanted to thank you for this project, another one of your great projects, saving the town a lot of money.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, thank you.
Should mention, I've had a chance to take a tour of this facility. It's phenomenal. I'd encourage, I'd almost suggest we have a board of selectmen meeting down there. I'm not sure if they have the facility to hold all of us, but it's just a great tour. And Mr. White, if I remember correctly, didn't you get your start at the WPCA facility?
What's that?
Didn't you get your start at the water treatment facility?
I worked my way up the pipe, you're right. Right, literally. Yes. Yes.
I'm not touching that one, Mr. White. I'm not going to touch that. But thank you. Any other discussion from the board before we go to the public? Any comment from the public? Seeing none, back to the board. Any final comment? We ready to vote?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, Mr.
Thanks,
White.
Rich.
Thank you, Mr. Bowman.
Thank you. Why not?
All right. Next up, Director of Community and Economic Development, public hearing on Neighborhood Assistance Act. Mr. Barnard, we're going to turn this over to you, and please conduct your public hearing.
Well, I'll just cue it up for you, just to provide members of the audience some information about the program. This is actually a state program that allows businesses to claim a credit against their state corporate tax liability for any contributions they might make to community programs that are run by either a municipal agency or a tax-exempt entity like a nonprofit. The town has participated in this program for a number of years. In order to be considered, applications from nonprofits or municipal groups have to be submitted to the town, approved by not only this body but the RTM, following a public hearing, which is what we're doing now, and then submitted to the Department of Revenue Services for their review and approval prior to the July 2nd deadline. And if they're approved, then the organizations are then able to go out and solicit contributions from corporations that might then apply for and receive a tax credit against their state corporate tax liability. Wish to point out, for the record, that there are no town funds involved in this program. We did receive 4 applications this year from the Wakeman Memorial Association, 2 applications from them, one for their after-school programs both at their Southport facility and at McKinley Elementary School. Also from Wakeman Memorial Association, a program to make energy-efficient improvements at the Southport location. These are replacement windows heating and ventilation systems, and a hot water tank replacement. We also received an application from the Pilot House Special Needs Resource Foundation on Colony Street in Fairfield for their Birth to 3 program, as well as from the Fairfield Police Department for their Crisis Intervention Team Training and Outreach, which is a program to train police officers to deal with individuals who may have a mental health affliction or developmental disability. So those are the 4 applications we received. With your permission, I guess we can open up to any comments we have from the public.
If I might, Mr. Bryner, could you just, for edification of the board here, tell us, can you identify a couple of prior winners and or awardees and how that worked, just to give us an example of how the program works?
Yes. In fact, Ms. McCarthy-Vahey called my office today and asked if I could provide some information as to last year's recipients. Last year, we received 1 application from Wakeman Memorial Association for the McKinley School after-school program. They had requested $35,000 through the program. In other words, they were seeking contributions from corporate entities to the tune of $35,000, of which then those businesses that do make that contribution could apply for and receive up to 60% tax credit against their corporate tax liability. They did receive 2 contributions, one from R.C. Bigelow and also from the Newman's Own Foundation. And the total amount of funds that the state recognized were in excess of $20,000. So it's a program that obviously brings resources into the community in support of nonprofit and other agencies. And it varies in terms of the number of applications that we received, but last year we had 1.
Just to be clear at that, a lot of times, especially since it's so close to April 15th, we're used to talking in terms of deductions, our income to minus tax. You mentioned a tax credit. Is that actually a credit against the profit number for a tax? So that's a very
Correct.
Powerful number.
It's a credit against their state corporate tax liability between up to 60 to 100%. They can claim a dollar-for-dollar credit for contributions made in support of energy efficiency or conservation improvements, like the one application we received this year from Wakeman Memorial Association. Typically, it's 60%, but if they're oversubscribed, in other words, the state gets more applications, they have tax credits to allocate, then the amount of the tax credit would be reduced, commensurate with whatever resources the state has available.
Okay, very good. What else is required for you to make this an official public hearing to meet your objectives?
This is last year.
Mr. Walsh?
Mark, it always surprises me that we don't get more applications. And I know in some years, there's probably been years we haven't received any in the past. With like having a GE or something around here, especially when you could possibly get 100% for some of these organizations that might be able to help, like the Fairfield Theater Company, become more energy efficient,
Yep.
or even the YMCA or something else like that. Do we market to corporations that are here, or like ones that we know of, or do we just go out to the nonprofits themselves and have them then try to partner with a funding source, whether that be an individual or a corporation?
Good question, actually both.
Okay.
A good example from this past year is, first of all, the program requires us to solicit applications from nonprofit or municipal agencies and then vet those applications, determine whether they are consistent with the community's goals, and then approve them after we have a public hearing. After that, then they have to go through the state process and get approved. And then, and only then, can the organization go out and solicit contributions from a business entity. But to your question, last year, when we actually had received an inquiry from the Newman's Own Foundation, it was looking for an opportunity to place, to support a program and receive tax credits. And so we provided them the information for Wakeman Memorial,
Great.
and we were able to match that up for them. So we do both.
Great.
But it's primarily, in terms of the number of applications, it's not an easy program to navigate. It seems simple on its face. It's a
Yeah.
very short application, but really you have a limited window in which you have to then, the organization has to then go out and solicit a contribution from a business that owes a tax liability to the state, corporate tax liability. and that's and then the business has a limited window in which to actually apply for and receive the tax credit. So it is, it seems simple on its face, but it's not an easy program to navigate as far as the state's concerned.
Well, I'm glad 4 seems to be kind of on the higher side for applications.
Yeah, we've had as many as 6, I
Okay.
think, during my tenure.
That's good.
So
And
4 is good.
from your application mailing list, it seems to suggest that the police department, fire department, and Board of Education would count?
You know, in addition to the folks we have listed there, we also send it out to the RTM, the Board of Selectmen. We also send it out to department heads. So if people know of any organizations that, this mailing list is obviously compiled based on our own records, and then people who call and inquire about the program, we put them on the mailing list. So if there are people that you think we should include in the future years, we'd be happy to add them at some point.
Would the police department or fire department be able to get one of these?
Yes, yes. In
Okay.
fact, they have in the
That's-
past. The police department here has received an allocation and actually did receive some contribution from a business. I think it was in support of a DUI program, DUI enforcement program. So police and fire departments, if you look through the list of municipalities that participate, there are a number of police and fire departments that do participate in the program.
Thank you.
Suggestion in terms of the mailing list that perhaps we add all those nonprofits who the town does support. I think that some of those who we, as a town, provide funds for are not included on this list. So just want to suggest to add those as well.
Okay.
Any other questions? before we
No.
vote? Any public comment? Ms. Stenick, if you could. Sans Pet.
I just want to say it's a lot harder to solicit those funds in response to your comment. It sounds great, it sounds like it'd be great, we should solicit all these businesses and they should be able to donate instead of paying the tax to the state, but a lot of the small businesses don't actually pay money to the state because they don't, that's why he's saying, like, it's Bigelow, it's huge companies, and if you can get GE, you know, the huge corporations that have the funds available to do that sometimes. And so it's, if we can target those companies and if they're interested in doing that, but a lot of them have specific things that they like to contribute towards. I know GE has pet projects that they do all over the country, and they gear their money toward those specific things and only those things.
But, and Mark, perhaps you can clarify, to Ms. Stenick's point, because this is state income tax credits.
Yep.
For the nonprofits that we're talking about, they could essentially get money from companies that are based in Stanford or Greenwich or
That's
Harvard, or
correct.
anywhere in the state.
Yep.
Because it's even though they gave it the money in Fairfield, they'll get a state tax credit for that.
Correct.
So the base is possibly bigger. Again, not necessarily easy to get at, but given so many Fairfield residents work in other towns and other companies outside of Fairfield, that might be another source.
Absolutely. Good point.
Right?
Just to clarify, I was speaking about the nonprofits for the original, and I understand, and clearly it's not that easy because we would have a much longer list and we'd be seeing a lot more of these, but it was, I think you understood.
Yes,
what
I
was
do.
saying, The
It-
nonprofit end as opposed to this business end, at least to let them know.
It generally works best when a nonprofit has an established relationship with a business, or they might have a person that is affiliated with that organization that works for a corporation that has a tax liability. So usually there's some relationship in order to meet the very strict time constraints that the program operates under. If you haven't fostered that relationship, it's kind of difficult to do that in a couple months that you have to put the application together.
Are we done with the
We
public
can,
hearing?
if there's no
minimum
other,
time
you can conclude the public hearing and then vote on the matter if you're so inclined.
What, help me out here, I don't have a voting item before us at the moment.
be the next item.
All right, so it's okay to move on to the next item?
Yes, I think we should just conclude the public hearing if there's no other further comment.
All right.
I appreciate the board's patience.
The public hearing is now closed. We're moving on to item 11, also from the Director of Community and Economic Development. A request for the approval of the applications received under the Neighborhood Assistance Act and for the Director of Community and Economic Development to be designated as the municipal liaison for the town of Fairfield for this program. Do I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
A second.
Second.
Mr. Barnhart, can you fill us in?
Well, we've pretty much covered the only other requirement is that the town needs to designate somebody to oversee the program on behalf of the municipality, and traditionally it's been the Director of Community Economic Development. So it doesn't entail a lot of my time, just putting this program together, soliciting the application, then putting it all together and patching it up to the state. So it's not a huge time commitment, but again, I think it's important in that those organizations that do participate have the opportunity to leverage some additional resources, bring some resources in the community in support of very worthwhile programs.
All right. Any discussion from the board? No. Any discussion from the public? All right, back to the board. Are we ready to vote?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Mark, thank you. Next up, also from the Director of Community and Economic Development, request for the approval of the program year 38, October 1, 2012 to September 30, 2013, Community Development Block Grant in an amount to be finalized by HUD, and to authorize the first selectman to execute any and all necessary documents that facilitate the town's participation in the CDBG program. May I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
A second.
Second.
All right. Any, Mr. Barnhart, back to you.
Again, I think most of the board here is familiar with the program. The town receives community development block grant funds from the federal government each year. It's an entitlement community, meaning that we don't need to submit an application. There's an allocation reserved for the town on the basis of its population and size. We have to put together and submit an annual plan to the federal government, to HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, which is the basis for this proposal before you. This year, we're expecting to receive quite a bit less than we did the prior year, which was quite a bit less from the year prior. I provided in your packet a graph which shows the declining grant funding from CDBG over the last 10 years or 10 or 12-year spread. Next year, we're expecting $431,202, which is a 16% reduction over the current year. We're allowed to allocate 15% of the grant to public service activities, and then 20% towards general program administration. We have to have 2 public hearings. We've already had one. We'll have a second one coming up next week, and then after this board has an opportunity to act, it has to go to the representative town meeting for its review and approval as well. In terms of the proposals, again, I was asked by Selectman McCarthy-Vahey for some information from the prior year, which I've provided here. This is last year's summary. I think you'll see many of the same or very familiar organizations that have applied for and received funds under this program for a number of years. Operation Hope, the Center for Women and Families, Fairfield Counseling Services, among others. There typically is some, we have used our funds to support some street and sidewalk improvements and income-eligible census tract locations in town, as well as in support of our microenterprise assistance program, and then in support of our various housing activities, our single-family rehab, our home ownership program, and our handyman program, to name a few. So I'd be happy to answer questions with respect to our proposed allocation under next year's annual plan.
I see that some of these categories are percentage-based.
Yes.
So as the money that overall is lowered coming to us, that's an automatic reduction
Yes.
for those percentage categories as a whole, let alone the individual
Correct.
programs that participate.
Correct. We've had over the last couple of years to make corresponding reductions to both funding available under the public service category as well as for program administration. And so those numbers reflect that. One question I was asked by Ms. McCarthy-Vahey was whether or not we were not funding or defunding any organization that had applied for community development block grant funds for the next year, and I'm happy to say that's not the case. We have been able to, albeit at a reduced level, fund each of the organizations that have requested assistance under the program. The one notable difference from this past year to this year under the public service activities was that we did provide funds this past year to the Fairfield Arts Center, and about $4,000 as I recall, and obviously they have since ceased operations, so we have opted obviously to reallocate those funds, which has helped to mitigate the impact to those public service recipients.
Any questions on the board? Kristen?
Yes, thank you for this information and for my questions earlier, and I still have a couple more.
Sure.
I also noticed the handyman.
Yes,
program.
that's a good point. Thank you. Both handyman and our multifamily rehab program, we have more than adequate resources remaining from the prior year to fully fund activities for the upcoming year. So we were not able to fully expend those resources, even though we're, in the case of handyman, we set aside about $10,000 each year, and we typically see about 50 to 60 applicants per year. It's pretty consistent, but we've amassed enough funds that we don't need to allocate any additional funds at the present time to meet that demand.
Another question, I usually ask this about the street and sidewalk
Yep.
improvements, and I know you get this at the RTM too. Where, do you have specifics at
Yes.
this point as to where the 60,000 is going to be targeted?
Yes. I've had some preliminary conversations with the Scott Bartlett and Rich White from the Public Works Department. We are targeting, for next year, we're targeting the area, as well as Jerry Lombardo, I might add, the area around Holland Hill Road, between Grassmere and New England, bordering the park. The number of sidewalks there were indicated that was in very poor repair. The park is very heavily used, and based on that, I think that makes a lot of sense to allocate those resources. It will be leveraged with funds that the department hopefully will have available to do street and sidewalk improvements in the area as well. So we typically try to work with them to maximize the resources, the limited resources we have.
All right. Mr. Walsh, any questions?
Sure. This program keeps reducing every year, right?
It has been over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
It's probably been at the $430,000 would probably be one of the lowest levels in 20 years, I would guess, going back over 20 years, yes.
And part of that reduction has caused the program administration, which can only be maxed out at 20%,
Yep.
has caused us to put in some money in the budget for
Correct.
one of the people in your office who
Yes.
we were able to pay for, correct?
Yes, yes.
This is where some of the funds for her are
That is
paid.
correct.
Okay.
Right.
That handyman program, I have to tell you, I didn't really know a lot about it, but I have a neighbor of mine who is she's like 93. She's on a fixed income. She takes advantage of the senior tax relief program. And she was able to utilize that program to get some work done around her house. And I can't tell you how grateful she was to find out about that program, and what a great program that was. And it's things like between the senior tax relief and that program are ways to try to keep our seniors in town. I think it's a great thing, and it should be advertised. I'm not saying you don't, but as much as possible.
No, thank you for the lead, and if I might, I'll just, for those in the audience that are not aware of what the handyman program entails, we
Well, technically,
basically...
Mr. Barnhart, everybody in town's in the audience. You've got...
Correct, I got the TV here. So the handyman program provides for low-income recipients. We provide 8 hours of free labor to do minor repairs around the home. The homeowner is responsible for any material cost, any replacement parts, but we provide the labor. And we've also been able to use this program in working with the health department to address some hoarding and other issues in town. We also work with the blight enforcement officer, the building official, through both the handyman and our single-family rehab program to help address instances of blight in town as well, using these resources, if the folks are income eligible. So anyone who's looking for information about our single-family rehab or our handyman program or any of the services we provide, please give us a call at 203-256-3120.
That was what number?
203-256-3120. And we'd be happy to provide information to you.
Right. I agree with Mr. Walsh. It seems like a tremendous program. Do these funds get utilized? I mean, does this money get used throughout the year?
Yes,
Does it
it-
go unspent, I guess? Are we reaching the population?
It does. I mean, there always are issues that we have with the handyman where we allocated in more, in better times, we were able to allocate, monies each year to the program, whether or not those monies would get spent. So we did amass a small pool that we can then rely upon. But for the most part, we're required to spend down the funds within a certain period of time. So these funds are definitely put to good use during the program year.
Great. Good. Any further questions from the board? Right. Any comments from the public? Yes, please come on up. Introduce yourself and speak in the
I'm
mic.
Susan Schnitzer. I'm just here to represent the Center for Women and Families. We've been receiving funding from the CDBG funds for a number of years, and both Mark and Joyce in his office have been tremendous partners. So we just want to officially support their proposals going forward.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Any other public comment? All right, seeing none, back to the board. Any final comments? Are we ready to vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Mark, thank you, and
Thank you very much.
please continue your good works for the town. That is a tough curve. All right, next up, a motion from the Penfield Reef Lighthouse Preservation Committee to hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution. Resolved that the Penfield Reef Lighthouse Preservation Committee is dissolved. Is there anyone here to speak to that?
Sandy is, and she'll be back in a minute. Oh, there she is.
Hi, Sandy. Ms. Mann, we're just taking on the motion to dissolve the committee as soon as, do I get a motion to accept? A second?
Second.
All right, for discussion. Ms. Mann, did you have any comments on that?
Yes, I do.
Thank you for coming, and if you could...
Sorry, my timing was
No,
so
in-
tight there.
Could be perfect. Just introduce yourself first, and then tell us...
My name is Sandy Mann. I've been acting as chairman of the Penfield Reef Lighthouse Preservation Committee. We've been meeting it for a number of months with the hope that we would be able to acquire Penfield Reef Lighthouse for the town. The GSA held an auction, closed that auction as of December 12th, and after several months of not letting us know what they were doing, they decided that they were not accepting any of the bids that were made for the lighthouse. The highest offer that was made for Penfield Reef Lighthouse was $45,000. However, the opportunity to purchase the lighthouse became entangled in one element of housekeeping that the GSA did not make very clear when the lighthouse was offered at auction. And that was the fact that no one would be allowed to reside in the lighthouse. We think this was probably part of the initial problem. In fact, when the U.S. Department of the Interior Parks Department got entangled in a long legal ordeal with Beacon Preservation, to whom the lighthouse had been originally granted. We had hoped as a committee that we would have a resounding success in trying to raise funds here in Fairfield towards the purchase of the lighthouse for the town. Unfortunately, the general economic conditions have prevented us from being able to acquire a sum of money to actually participate in that auction that was held before. We had raised about $22,000. We did use $10,000 initially as a deposit so that we could at least be made aware of the process of the lighthouse auction. You know, you couldn't play if you didn't pay. That's what the GSA basically said to us. We did not, however, place any financial offer for the lighthouse. As a result, we were not able to accomplish what we hoped our charge would be, and we felt that there was not adequate support from the town in terms of ownership of the lighthouse. We are confronted with several issues now. There are many of us who feel that this lighthouse is an icon for this town. When I appeared before you at some point when the auction was taking place, I remember that you asked me, give me 3 reasons why we should buy this lighthouse. I remember that question very clearly, and I was, at the time, I was caught for words. To me, that lighthouse is as much a part of this town as this town hall is, as the historical group is, as the Burr Mansion is, as the windmill is, and even more so. So if you were to ask me today why we should acquire the lighthouse, I would say to you 3 times in a row, it's an icon for our town. However, things have not worked out for us. The GSA now is proposing to open another auction. They hope to get an auction price of anywhere from $95,000 to $195,000. They have come up with those figures because other similar offshore lighthouses have sold in that price range. So it's their idea that they'll be able to find somebody out there who will pay that price. The committee doesn't think so. And as Mr. Walsh had said before, why can't they give it to us as they had offered to do initially? The committee's given this a lot of long, hard thought. Everyone has expressed many opinions. It still is important to all of us. I would not want you to think that we are making this suggestion or request from a perspective that we don't want the lighthouse. That is not accurate. We want it. We see that a plan for acquiring the lighthouse is a very time-consuming thing. Given the current membership on the committee, if this town were to try to acquire the lighthouse, we would need the help of people who have a construction background, who could bring to us experience in contracting and electrical work and construction, and perhaps might have the ability to help us out with some goods to use towards the reconstruction of the lighthouse. Given that scenario, we feel that it is best to come to you and ask that the current committee be dissolved. We also have a very important question to ask you that is linked to all of this. If somehow the Parks Department and/or the GSA were willing to give the lighthouse to the town at no cost to the town, would the town be willing to accept the property? That's really a very important underlying question. We do not feel that that question was ever answered for us in a way that we had a better sense of the underlying issues for our deliberations.
We actually have 2 items on our agenda.
Yes, I realize
And what I'm
that.
going to ask is that we go back to specifically address the first one.
The first one, I'm sorry, yes,
And what you're
certainly.
requesting is that the Penfield Reef Lighthouse Preservation Committee, as it's currently enacted, be dissolved.
Correct.
All right, and does that have the full support of the committee that it be
Yes,
disbanded?
it does. Yes, it does. We met
And
last
just for
week.
the record, I see Ms. Stenick, a member of the committee, shaking her head up and down to confirm.
Yes.
All right.
Every one of, and Jennifer Carpenter has been serving on the committee all along as well.
And
This,
then-
I'm sorry.
Do you have more comments on that specific point before we ask some questions from the board?
No.
All right, then,
No.
may I, Mr. Walsh?
Why does the committee have to be dissolved? And then in the very next item, you're reformulating it. Are you trying to have the members terminated so that a new group of people could come in? I don't understand why.
One of the things that has occurred is we've had a number of resignations on the committee, simply because people have not had the time they expected to have. When you have 14 people on a committee, it's very difficult to get a quorum at times because people have different things going on. And when you do have resignations, your number for a quorum still remains based upon the original number of individuals on the committee. So from a parliamentary procedure point of view, that has made it difficult for us a number of times when we have had meetings. The second thing that we feel is that because we were not able to accomplish our charge as we had hoped to, that the most appropriate thing would be to dissolve the committee.
Yeah, that's fine.
Kristen, any questions?
More of a comment about.
The floor is yours.
The dissolution, I guess. I heard you saying in your initial comments that if in the next item under discussion, if there theoretically were to be a new committee at some point, that it would need to have some different individuals and people who have construction experience, et cetera, which it seems to me would in part answer Mr. Walsh's question. However, I also think that this just, if I may, a general comment about committees, commissions. As I've mentioned earlier in this meeting, I've been had worked with the former assistant town attorney, plan to work also with the new town attorney in the first selectman's office, looking at all our different boards and commissions, and there were no term lengths assigned to the folks on this committee. So, that's just something for us to consider as we're going forward, as we appoint different kinds of groups that are advisory or special committees going forward. So just a general comment.
Go ahead. How much money was collected?
About $22,000 in
Okay.
total.
And there was a $10,000 deposit, but that has come back.
That
came
has
back.
been returned.
So there's $22,000 residing with the town.
That is
in a-
correct.
In a restricted account, so it's only used for lighthouse purposes. It's
That is
not-
correct.
If we dissolve this committee, what happens to that funding?
If we dissolve this committee, our hope is to create another committee, excuse me. And our hope is that we would contact the donors and explain that we are hopeful that they would allow us to pass the donations to a newly reconstituted committee. If not, those donations will be returned to each and every person. We stated all along very clearly that if we were not able to acquire the lighthouse, that donations would be returned. However, we do feel very strongly that people who made donations made them with the concept that we were working to acquire that lighthouse. So from that viewpoint, we have failed their expectations.
How many active members of your committee are there now?
Approximately, I think there were 9. 10, Jennifer? 10,
So there's-
excuse me.
There are 10 remaining?
10 remaining, yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
So it's still possible to get a quorum if you needed to make a decision?
It's very tough.
Understand, I just technically possible.
It is technically
If there were
possible.
5 left, it would be technically impossible.
That is
Okay,
correct.
so it's still technically. just
But
trying to confirm.
technically, with 10, that it still would be possible.
Okay. I think, Mr. Walsh, did you have?
I guess my follow-up to that, you were asking the exact question I was going to ask, was whether the money would have to be returned if the committee was disbanded, which leads me even more to the reason of why don't we just change the charge? Put in the term language that we want, reduce the size of the committee, reducing the if there's people who aren't there. This way, all the money stays where it is. And we don't have to, have the possibility of, some people want to get out, some people want to get in, and we just amend the charge as opposed to starting from scratch and possibly having to send funds all over the place. Or making calls just to hear people say, no, I want it to be done, and let's maintain the funds where they are. So I'm just wondering whether it might make more sense to amend the charge.
May I add something to the discussion that perhaps has some pertinence here? The committee asked that I put together a letter that we send to all of our legislators, asking them to get involved and to see what they can do to get the Parks Department to have the GSA take Penfield Reef Lighthouse out of the auction. When this originally occurred, the person who was heading this effort retired, and instead of coming back to the original application process, our lighthouse suddenly got passed along to the GSA. They never looked at our application. And as I had pointed out to you at one point, we were not aware, as a prior committee, that we could ask for a review of the decision. I feel that was just that was a huge factor in this.
Just following on what both of you have said, as a practical matter, if we dissolve the committee and then there's money, who makes the decision? The committee, the town? That's in one part why I will probably be voting against this at this point in time. However, I think I'm not really prepared to vote on this charge today necessarily, because I think that if we're going to maintain, correct, in other words, this charge is the charge approved by the Board of Selectmen July 6, 2011. But Mr. Walsh's point is valid. We can make amendments that would include terms. We could clarify what we're looking for going forward. I hear one of the questions, and forgive me, I think I'm kind of jumping into the next item, but it relates to the potential, if I may. We don't know what's going to happen here. It's, at this point in time, we don't know if there will be an auction and someone else will successfully acquire the lighthouse and it's not the town, and there are a number of factors. But what I hear being asked is, if the GSA would give us the lighthouse, would the town be willing to accept it? And would we want to keep a committee to look at that possibility, which is different than actively paying for or acquiring? So I guess all that said is that I will probably my plan is to vote against item number 13, but I would like to postpone item 14 so that we can kind of come back, give some thought to what the specifics of the changes to the charge might need to be.
Okay. Mr. Walsh?
I would agree. At this point in time, I think I'd rather keep the committee together and go for, have a broader discussion, maybe not today, maybe with the committee present, or a broader discussion about what are the recommendations going forward. I'd rather keep the funds in place with the committee that's there, and have a broader discussion about how the charge can be changed. as opposed to terminating something and then starting right back up and maybe having to disperse all these funds and go through an administrative nightmare.
Yes, yeah, that's something that we have talked about as a committee.
Thank you. I would tend to agree. I also think we'll ask for a ruling on kind of the whole quorum issue, because it says in our charge from 9 to 14 members.
Yes.
And though initially we did identify 14, we're back down to 9. That fits within this. I would think a quorum wouldn't have to be 8, but in fact could be less than
If
that.
I may speak, I asked former Assistant Town Attorney Eileen Connelly the question. She says you have to go with the original number the Board of Selectmen approved of 14, divide by 7, divide by
It's 8, I
2
understand.
is 7, plus 1 is 8. So it's at least 8.
Thank you, Ms. Carpenter.
So if we amended the charge, though, that number would change.
Yeah, yes, I'd like to explore that.
Yeah.
Okay.
As an option. So, do we need to talk more, or do we want to either vote on this or postpone them both?
One more question. I guess my request to you would be if we could get formal resignations from those who are no longer serving. And again, this is part of our, trying to
Right.
improve the process. If we have formal resignations, then we have, X number of members. We can also be clear then as to who we're talking about, and if there are some other new folks who want to get involved. I actually had someone in the audience earlier who suggested to me they might be willing to serve on this committee. We could then do that all at once, potentially, if we can.
I do have written resignations from those people. I haven't turned them over to anyone, but the other committee members have all seen them when they have come in, so. And we feel that if we are going to add anyone to the committee, that the people need to know they need to be committed to fundraising.
Just
I'm
to
sorry.
focus the discussion on the
Excuse me.
resolution before us, which is
I'm
the
sorry.
dissolution of the committee, since we seem to be comfortable with that. There are plenty of other issues, and there's a second item on the
Yes.
agenda. Okay, if I go to the public.
Yes.
Any comments from the public on the dissolution of the committee and that topic only, please?
When we had our
If
meeting,
you'd be kind
I'm sorry,
enough to
Sherry
identify.
Stenik, when we had our meeting, the Lighthouse meeting the other day, when we were discussing this item, we didn't have council there to discuss and bounce off the idea of being able to alter the current charge. I don't think anybody's opposed to that. We did think there should be an end date. We did think that there should be some restructuring of the committee. Some people have dropped off, and so it was important to get new people on. We didn't know how you'd have to do that. If you can do it by restructuring that's a better idea, in my opinion.
Thank you.
All right, any other public comment? Seeing none, back to the board. Any other comments, or are we ready to vote?
Ready?
All right, just to be clear, we are ready to vote to hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution. Resolved that the Penfield Reef Lighthouse Preservation Committee is dissolved. All in favor? All opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Thank you.
Thank you.
So the committee still exists. I'm going to suggest that we, next item up, thank you, Ms. Mann, is to hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution. Resolved that a new committee to acquire and preserve the Penfield Reef Lighthouse is established and will operate under the Penfield Reef Lighthouse Preservation Committee charge approved by the Board of Selectmen July 2006. I am going to suggest, given the discussion we've had, given our last item, that we in fact take a vote on this and vote it down so that we don't have to get involved in postponing it to an...
Yes.
Yes,
Is that...
please.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely.
Any further discussion on that?
No.
Any comments from the public? And Ms. Mann, that will include you?
No, that is, I'm
All right.
glad
Thank
you're
you.
doing that.
Back to the board. We ready to vote?
Yes.
Yes.
All in favor?
Oh.
Let me see.
No.
Resolved. So we're going to have to vote. It's going to have to be a no.
No.
Okay, all in
It's
favor?
backwards.
All opposed? All right.
Anyone wants to
Done.
move that?
Oh, sorry. Can I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
A second? All in favor? All opposed?
Nay.
All right.
Well,
No,
the few chances where two
thank you.
negatives do make a
Thank
positive.
you.
Yeah. Thank you.
May-
Ms. Mann, thank you. I think we've got some more work to do, and we'll have a
May
chance
we
to talk
address
some
some
more.
of the questions that the committee has with you, perhaps at the next meeting?
We'll set up a time to do that.
Thank you
Let's
very
get some
much.
clarity on the charge.
Yes.
Let's talk to perhaps the town attorney about how some of this might work.
Wonderful.
And get
Thank
some
you.
clear guidance to your committee.
Thank you. Hopefully, in the meantime, the GSA plan will fail.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Thank you
continued
for all your
efforts.
work, and speaking as one donor, you're welcome to keep my money till you acquire the White House.
Thank you.
All right, tax collector refunds, I believe we don't have any, so there's no motion needed there. To hear and act on any communications, I don't have that. To hear, consider, and act upon any other business that shall properly come before us, I know of none there. Next item up is from the town attorney, a private executive session for pending litigation. May I have a motion to go into private executive session?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, folks. We'll need to...